Okay, let's dig into this material. And I have to say, right at the start, it's incredibly sensitive stuff we're looking at today.
Definitely. Very powerful, and frankly, it comes with some serious warnings attached.
It really does. We're looking at sources that explore emotional trauma, but not in a purely clinical way, you
Right?
know?
More as a fundamental part of just being human, something everyone carries,
Yeah.
according to these sources.
These invisible bruises, as they call them. And the core idea presented is that these vulnerabilities, well, they create openings.
Openings that can be understood,
Mhm.
potentially. Used, that's the difficult part. Used for connection or for influence, even manipulation.
Exactly. And that brings us to this concept. The material highlights the hidden door.
The idea that understanding these deep, often hidden wounds,
Mm.
it gives you access
Access to what, though?
to the really vulnerable, guarded parts of someone, their inner world, their psyche, as the sources put it.
The private chamber where, the fears and unmet needs live.
Precisely. And that's where the warning bells start ringing loudly in this material.
Because having that access, understanding those wounds, the sources are blunt about it. It gives you immense power.
Immense power. And they're very clear this power can be constructive, for healing, empathy, real connection.
But
But, and it's a huge but, that same power, that same understanding can be twisted, used manipulatively for control.
at someone else's expense, it's explicitly described as potentially dangerous knowledge. A double-edged sword, really.
And sharper than most people realize, perhaps.
Absolutely. So let's be crystal clear for everyone listening. Our goal here in this deep dive, it is not about teaching manipulation.
No, absolutely not. Far from it.
The sources themselves warn strongly against misuse. They actually outline manipulative tactics in order to caution against them.
Right. Our mission is to unpack what this material says about identifying trauma, how it shows up in behavior and interactions.
And, crucially, to really shine a light on the ethical tightrope, that incredibly fine line you walk when you gain this kind of deep understanding about someone's vulnerability.
We're dissecting the claims here, looking at how the material describes the mechanisms, both positive, like connection and healing, and negative, like manipulation and control.
How these things can stem from recognizing trauma. It's not about endorsing any strategy.
No, it's about understanding what the sources claim happens when trauma is understood and amplifying that critical, urgent warning about misuse that runs right through this material.
Yeah. This is about awareness of what these sources present as a hidden landscape under our interactions, those unseen battles, and grappling with the power and the profound responsibility that comes with knowing about it.
It's heavy stuff, no doubt.
It really is. But important to understand, according to these sources. So where do they start building this picture?
It begins with the fundamental premise, the universal scar.
Universal scar.
The sources basically say, look, life is inherently painful sometimes. It just is. You can't avoid it.
Filled with things like rejection, failure.
Exactly. Rejection that cuts deep, failures that make you question yourself, losses that just tear your world apart.
And the point isn't that only some people experience this.
No, the point is that everyone does.
Yeah.
Pain, rejection, failure, loss. It's framed as just part of the human condition.
Okay, so everyone experiences it, but what's the implication?
The implication, according to the material, is that these things don't just happen and disappear. They leave marks. Lasting marks.
The invisible bruises again.
Right. Wounds you can't see on the surface, but they're there, lodged deep in the emotional core.
And unlike a physical bruise, these don't always just heal up neatly on their own.
That's the argument. They can stay tender, reactive, just under the surface, ready to be triggered.
And people cope with this in different ways, right? The material talks about that.
Oh, definitely. Some become masters of disguise. You know, the type polished exterior, always fine, nothing bothers them, maybe a forced smile.
Hiding it all.
Yeah. While others, they wear it more like armor. You see the defensiveness, the guardedness, keeping people at arm's length.
Trying not to get hurt again.
Exactly. Creating distance as a shield.
But whether it's the smile or the armor, the sources suggest there's a common driver underneath.
Yes, a very specific one. Deep down, almost everyone is protecting some core part of themselves.
Protecting what?
A part that somewhere along the line felt fundamentally unloved or unworthy or just not good enough.
Wow. That's presented as almost universal.
Near universal, yeah. This deep-seated fear that if people really saw the wounded part, it would just confirm those old painful beliefs.
And why this first point is so critical, why it matters to you listening, is because the sources argue this isn't abstract psychology.
No, it's presented as the hidden reality of the people you interact with constantly, every day.
Colleagues, friends, family, maybe even yourself.
Potentially, yes. It's
Right.
laid out as the foundational understanding everyone's carrying something, some unhealed or partly healed pain.
And the immediate warning attached is, recognizing this baseline vulnerability in others is presented as a potent tool. It's step one.
It's the first key, really, to unlocking that hidden door they talk about.
It completely reframes how you might see everyday interactions, doesn't it?
Totally. Behaviors that seem confusing, maybe frustrating, sudden defensiveness, pulling away, needing constant approval.
They aren't just random quirks.
According to this material, no. They're deeply rooted responses, shaped by these underlying, maybe unacknowledged pains.
And seeing that potential origin, that's what allows for a different kind of interaction.
An interaction that, the sources suggest, doesn't get stuck on the surface behavior, but has the potential for better or worse to engage with those deeper layers.
Okay, so life leaves these invisible bruises. The next step in the material is understanding that the trauma isn't just the event itself.
Right. That's a crucial distinction they make. It's not just what happened back then.
It's how the mind, the heart, responded.
Exactly. How your inner self reacted at the time. And this is critical, how that emotional and psychological response persists. How it continues to operate now in the present.
So even if logically you know something is over,
Your mind knows it's over. You've moved on in time. But that inner self, that emotional core where the bruise is, it hasn't necessarily caught up.
trauma lingers. That's the idea.
It lingers, yeah. It doesn't just neatly resolve itself. It becomes part of your internal landscape, woven into the fabric.
And this lingering, it has real effects on fundamental things.
Profound effects, the sources say, on your capacity for trust, how you give and receive love, how you react automatically in certain situations, how you form and maintain connections.
It gets deep into your emotional wiring, maybe without you even realizing it.
Completely influencing perceptions, responses,
Yeah.
often unconsciously.
Does the material give examples of how this shows up outwardly?
Yes, several, like
Yeah.
a constant low-level anxiety maybe, always there, humming beneath the surface, makes it hard to relax.
Or being hypervigilant, always on guard.
Exactly. Scanning for threats, leading to being overly defensive, maybe suspicious of people's motives.
Or the opposite, emotional shutdown.
Right. Just an inability to access or express deep feelings. Sometimes maybe not even feel them, like an internal wall went up.
And the key point, the sources stress here, these aren't just personality flaws.
Not presented that way at all. They're described explicitly as coping mechanisms.
Things the mind developed to protect itself.
Sophisticated strategies, often unconscious, developed during or after the painful experience, designed to stop you from feeling that kind of pain ever again.
So the analysis point here is huge. If you see these difficult behaviors, the defensiveness, the withdrawal, the neediness, not as intentional choices,
Right, as protective layers, built over deep, still tender wounds.
it changes everything. It shifts from judgment or frustration.
To understanding. Understanding there's an underlying struggle, a past injury still affecting the present.
And this understanding, the sources warn, is exactly where the hidden door opens.
Precisely. Because recognizing these coping mechanisms, seeing the patterns of defensiveness, the signs of shutdown, the need to please, the fear of rejection,
That's how you identify where the trauma might lie, according to this material.
it's like seeing the smoke that tells you where the fire is. Recognizing these patterns is presented as the way in, access to that protected, vulnerable space.
They're presenting this not just as an observation, but almost like a roadmap.
A roadmap for gaining access, yes.
Okay.
It makes a very specific point that these behaviors aren't random. They indicate where past pain is still active.
And understanding that connection-present behavior linked to past wound allows for a different kind of interaction.
One that, instead of getting tangled in the surface reaction, can potentially bypass those protective layers and, well, touch the deeper hurt.
And that is where the power and the peril really lies.
Exactly.
Okay, let's dig into where these bruises, these coping mechanisms, typically come from, according to the sources. They highlight specific common roots.
Yes, they map out some key origins, areas to be, as they put it, watchful for if you're observing patterns.
And the first one they focus on is childhood.
Childhood abuse, yes. And they're very direct. Physical, verbal, emotional, sexual abuse. It's presented as perhaps the most foundational because it happens during those critical developmental years.
Why is it considered so foundational? What's the core damage?
It fundamentally shatters a child's sense that the world is safe. That's the core of it. Instead of learning trust, security.
They learn the opposite from the people who should have protected them.
Exactly. They learn the world is unpredictable, dangerous, even cruel. So trust. It's broken right from the start. Their basic relationship with the world is damaged, and the impact described is, well, they internalize these incredibly damaging core beliefs.
About themselves.
Yes, that they're inherently unworthy of love, of safety. They carry misplaced guilt for things that weren't their fault. Deep shame just for being who they are.
And these beliefs feel like fundamental truths to them.
Absolutely, like part of their identity.
Yeah. What are the outward signs the material suggests looking for in adults?
Things like a real reluctance to open up, to be vulnerable, an overriding need to please others, to gain approval, avoid conflict at all costs.
And fear of rejection.
A huge, often crippling fear of rejection makes them super sensitive to any perceived criticism.
The material has that evocative phrase,
Yeah.
echoes of their childhood.
Yes. Get close, pay attention, and you might see it in subtle defensive gestures, hesitant words, maybe apologizing too quickly. The echoes are there.
It raises a big question, doesn't it? How does breaking trust so early create such deep, lasting vulnerabilities?
The implication is strong. It's not just a scar. It fundamentally shapes their whole operating system. It makes that early trauma uniquely powerful because the foundation of safety was never properly built.
Okay, what's the second common root the sources discuss?
Neglect. And they frame this very powerfully, not just as something missing, but as abuse by absence.
Abuse by absence, meaning
It's not about active harm being done to the child, but about what was consistently not given. Being unseen, unheard, emotionally unsupported, lacking that consistent presence and validation.
how does that get internalized? What's the belief that forms?
The child internalizes that their own needs, their emotions, their very presence, they just don't matter. They learn they aren't important enough to be seen or consistently cared for.
And how does that manifest later in life?
The sources suggest a couple of ways. Maybe emotional numbness, like they had the shut-down feeling to cope. Or, conversely, deep insecurity and self-doubt, constantly questioning their worth.
And they often seek validation.
Constantly. Sometimes desperately seeking it from others because they never got it internally or early on. But here's the tragic part.
What's that?
Deep down, they often believe they don't actually deserve the validation they crave. So there's this painful internal conflict.
Wanting it, but feeling unworthy of it.
Exactly. And this, the material points out, creates a key vulnerability. Makes them particularly susceptible to influence based on attention.
Why attention specifically?
Because any kind word, warm gaze, consistent presence, genuine validation, it feels vital. Like oxygen, the sources say, because they were starved of it.
So offering consistent positive attention.
Can lead to attachment, the material states quite directly, even if they barely know you, because you're providing something they've desperately needed for so long.
It's interesting to contrast the active pain of abuse with this passive pain of neglect.
Different experiences, but both result in this profound need for external validation. And for someone neglected, that positive attention becomes an incredibly powerful tool for influence or connection, precisely because it hits that core unmet need.
And the third root mentioned.
Profound loss. This isn't just everyday sadness, but experiences like the death of a parent, a partner, a close friend, losses that fundamentally shatter their emotional world, their sense of stability.
The kind of loss that leaves lingering, complex emotions.
Yes, pervasive grief that doesn't just fade, deep-seated fear of future loss or abandonment, maybe unresolved anger about it all. It becomes a constant undercurrent.
And this creates an internal conflict too.
A powerful one. They crave safety and connection, having known the pain of its absence, but they also deeply fear experiencing that shattering loss again.
So they want connection, but resist vulnerability.
Exactly. Opening up feels terrifying because it reintroduces the possibility of that immense pain.
And this is where the sources describe what they call a seductive opportunity, framed within this context of influence or connection.
Yes, and it's a loaded term given the context. The material suggests becoming the person who can simply be with their sadness, sit with their grief without trying to fix it.
Handle their emotional storms, the grief, the fear, the anger, without getting overwhelmed or running away.
And critically, without abandoning them, providing that consistent, non-reactive, accepting presence through their pain.
What happens then, according to the sources?
They suggest that the person will slowly, cautiously begin to open their heart again, You become a safe harbor for them.
A safe harbor in their emotional storm. And the material says this is incredibly powerful.
Incredibly powerful in gaining their trust and connection? Yes. That's explicitly stated.
But again, that raises a huge ethical question, doesn't it? The responsibility that comes with being that safe harbor.
Immense responsibility. If someone opens up that level of pain related to profound loss and sees you as their safe space, the power you hold is enormous.
And the potential for harm if that trust is broken.
Equally enormous, devastating. It highlights that entering that space of deep vulnerability comes with a very heavy ethical weight.
Okay, so we've looked at the roots: abuse, neglect, loss. Now, how does this play out in the present, especially in relationships?
This is where the material says the unhealed pain becomes most visible, often most destructive. The sources state very clearly that many relationships don't end from lack of love.
But because they collapse under the weight of these old wounds.
Exactly. The unacknowledged weight of past trauma carried by one or both partners.
And the examples they give are pretty relatable, I imagine.
Very. Like the partner with a deep fear of abandonment, maybe from childhood, who becomes clingy, needs constant reassurance, gets highly reactive to any perceived distance.
Or the partner triggered by past criticism or control who responds to conflict by just shutting down, becoming cold.
Distant, cold, putting up walls. Yeah, classic examples.
And the absolute key point the material hammers home here is
That neither reaction is fundamentally about the present situation or the current partner.
they're not reacting to what's happening right now.
No. They are, according to these sources, acting out old wounds, replaying dynamics, fears, coping strategies developed long ago. The past is forcefully intruding into the present.
That's a core warning. Emotional trauma makes people relive the past in the present.
Which means arguments about seemingly small things, dishes, plans, money, aren't really about those things at all.
They're triggers.
Triggers that activate the old emotional pain and fear. The fight isn't about the dishes, it's about what happened then.
The current event just opens the door to that past emotional landscape.
Right. And the emotional response feels disproportionate because it's being filtered through that raw, potent lens of past pain.
The material even offers reinterpretations of these behaviors.
Yes, crucial ones. Like the partner who shuts down might not be trying to be cold or manipulative in that moment.
They might be terrified.
Overwhelmed by terror, yeah. Triggered by something echoing an unsafe past where expressing feelings led to harm.
And someone lashing out.
Might be acting out profound pain or fear, a sense of being trapped, triggered by the interaction, but rooted long before this relationship.
And the warning is stark. If this isn't acknowledged, understood.
This pain, these unacknowledged wounds become the emotional battlefield where relationships die. It's the unseen force eroding connection, destroying trust.
But then, here it comes again, the seductive opportunity framing within the influence context. And this sounds really controversial.
It is. The material suggests that if you can learn to see these triggers, look past the clinginess or the coldness.
And instead of judging it, respond with empathy for the potential underlying wound.
You can, and this is the phrase used, bypass the defenses.
Bypass the defenses, get past the protective wall.
Right. Because the clinginess or the shutdown isn't their core self, it's the barrier. By responding with empathy for the possible pain underneath, not frustration at the barrier.
You connect directly to the vulnerability, the hurt.
That's the claim. And once they feel truly safe with you, genuinely seen in that deep, vulnerable place,
They let you in, deeper than before.
piece by piece, they let you in.
Wow. That's presented as a critical moment, a moment of profound access.
It is. And the question it forces us to ask, the ethical question is, how does seeing past behavior to old wounds allow someone to bypass defenses so effectively?
And what are the implications of having that ability? It creates a massive power imbalance.
Huge. And the sources imply this is precisely where the potential for misuse becomes incredibly acute. Accessing that vulnerable state is the pivot point.
Which leads directly into this section the material calls emotional seduction, making that link explicit between understanding trauma and gaining influence.
Very explicit. It basically says, if you want deep emotional influence, forget conventional charm, forget trying to be impressive.
Why? Why forget that?
Because, the sources argue, people with significant trauma often have a built-in radar for superficiality. They've likely been let down or manipulated before.
So what do they crave instead?
Someone who sees through the act, someone who perceives the hidden pain beneath the surface presentation, beneath the coping mechanisms.
So the recommended strategy is counterintuitive.
Very. It starts with deliberately slowing down. And crucially, Make it not about you. Don't talk about yourself. Don't try to be interesting.
Instead, become interested.
Profoundly interested in the other person. Ask gentle, open-ended questions about their experience. Observe carefully, non-judgmentally,
Yeah.
and just.
Yaxim?
Listen. Actively listen.
Tuning into subtle cues, body language, pauses.
Exactly. Noticing how they hold themselves when certain topics come up, the hesitations, even contradictory things like smiling when talking about something sad, using humor as a shield.
And the stated goal of this approach is?
To enter the world of their wounds, but not aggressively, not by pushing or fixing.
More like creating a safe space, inviting them to share, and then just witnessing.
Precisely. Witnessing with presence, empathy, acceptance.
The sources even give example phrases, things to say.
They do. Simple sounding, but powerful in this context because they validate the hidden pain. Things like, that sounds like it must have been really difficult.
Or I can't imagine how that must have felt.
Or acknowledging their strength. You're strong for getting through that.
Why do these phrases work so well, according to the material?
Because they validate the person's internal reality. They acknowledge the pain others might have ignored. This validation is soothing. It signals acceptance, not judgment.
And that disarms them.
It helps disarm them, yes. They feel safer. Those emotional defenses built up over years start to soften, maybe melt away in the face of that genuine understanding.
And this disarming is directly linked to influence.
Explicitly. When someone feels that profound emotional safety, their defenses drop, they open up more, and they start to associate that feeling relief, comfort, trust specifically with you.
You equals safety.
That association, safety acceptance, is presented as the very beginning of emotional influence, a bond built on acknowledged vulnerability.
And again, the warning is layered in here because it highlights how targeting that deep craving for validation and safety.
Exactly. It highlights the vulnerability and lays bare how intentionally meeting that need can be used to gain significant influence. It reveals the potential for exploitation the moment you see and acknowledge someone's deepest hurts.
Building on that, the sources focus on another tool, focused listening, calling full, undivided attention one of the most seductive things you can offer.
Seductive in the sense of drawing someone close, yes. And again, why it's so potent is tied directly to the experience of trauma.
Because they've often felt unseen, unheard.
Unseen, unheard, talked over, misunderstood. Their deepest feelings often invalidated or ignored.
So when you offer genuine, undistracted presence, listening deeply, not interrupting, not judging, not making it about you.
You become, in their eyes, a rarity. That's the word used.
And the principle is, what is rare is valuable.
Simple but powerful. In a distracted world, being truly heard is incredibly precious, especially to someone starved for it.
What techniques do they suggest for this focused listening?
Simple things, really. Genuinely nodding, soft eye contact, not intense staring, maybe subtly mirroring their tone or pace, asking thoughtful follow-up questions that show you're actually listening.
And allowing silence, not rushing to fill it.
Yes, letting comfortable silence exist, giving them space.
What's the described outcome of this?
People, especially guarded ones, start to reveal their raw selves, sharing things they've maybe never told anyone, because the safety of being truly heard is such a rare invitation.
And the underlying craving this addresses is the need to be known.
Deeply known, yes, not just surface stuff, known in their complexity, their pain, their truth. And if you satisfy that craving, even partly.
A profound emotional connection forms.
That's the claim. It's characterized as active presence, creating emotional intimacy without physical touch, just through listening.
And here comes the pivot. The warning aspect sharpens right here.
Immediately, creating this deep bond through intentional listening, built on witnessing vulnerability. It's directly linked to having significant leverage. The material shifts starkly to the dark side.
Implying this intimacy, this access, can be easily misused.
Tragically and easily, yes, because it's built on their deepest needs and exposed tenderness. The moment they feel truly seen and safe is presented as the moment they're most open to connection and to harm.
Which brings us to the most critical, sobering part. The explicit warning, stated with absolute clarity.
Understanding someone's emotional trauma gives you immense power. No ambiguity there.
And this power isn't abstract, it's real because you have access to their most vulnerable places.
You know, their fears, their insecurities, their core wounds. It's a direct line to their emotional core.
And the sources detail how this power can be used manipulatively, chillingly.
Yes. One tactic described is creating emotional addiction. By alternating intense closeness and validation, Giving them that oxygen with sudden, unpredictable distance or coldness, it keeps them hooked, craving the fix of your positive attention. Emotionally reliant, easier to control.
What else?
Subtly reinforcing their wounds, not overt cruelty, but gentle reminders of past failures, insecurities, hurts, done in a way that makes them feel flawed, broken.
Implying they need you to feel whole or safe.
Exactly. That you are the key to their stability.
And shaping their decisions.
By subtly reminding them of past fears or pain related to certain choices, suggesting a path is dangerous will repeat their trauma, unless perhaps they follow your lead. Stay close to your safety.
The material gives this a name.
The dark art of emotional manipulation. And it delivers that incredibly stark summary. It works, and it destroys.
Acknowledging effectiveness while condemning the impact.
Precisely. It works because it targets those vulnerabilities, but the destruction is profound.
What's the described consequence for the person manipulated this way?
Devastating. They become deeply bonded, reliant on the person who seems to finally get them. But if that trust is betrayed, if that vulnerability is exploited,
It deepens the original trauma.
tenfold. The material warns. It shatters that fragile sense of safety they might have started to build.
And the most direct warning from the sources.
Just because you can use this power doesn't mean you should. A clear moral line. Crossing it causes immense, potentially irrefutable harm.
It really makes you think, why are these tactics, the push-pull, reinforcing wounds, using fear, so effective because they target trauma?
And why is betrayal after this kind of vulnerability-based connection so much more damaging?
It feels like violating something sacred, that private chamber they let you into.
It's leveraging their deepest needs and fears. So breaking that trust isn't just betrayal. It strikes at the core of their ability to feel safe and connect at all. Uniquely devastating.
Thankfully, the sources don't just leave us there. They offer an alternative path.
Yes, a clear ethical path, contrasted sharply with manipulation, using the understanding for genuine healing, support, healthy connection. Love, essentially.
And how is it framed differently?
As choosing to be the person who, when faced with their pain and difficult behaviors, you don't run, you don't judge, you don't exploit, you stay with empathy.
So the intention and method are different, not using emotional bait.
But inviting them towards healing. By consistently modeling safety, honesty, compassion, respect. Creating an environment where healing feels possible.
And the goal shifts, too. Not dependency.
But mutual respect, genuine intimacy, shared trust. That, the sources claim, is the kind of connection, the kind of influence that truly lasts and is healthy.
And just like the manipulative phrases, there are phrases for healing, for building bridges.
Yes, phrases that communicate acceptance, belief in their wholeness, like, you don't have to hide that here with me.
Or you're not broken because of what happened.
It makes absolute sense that you feel this way, given your experience. Things that validate and reassure.
What's the impact of these words?
They help people feel deeply seen and accepted, wounds and all. Signals that the hidden parts are safe. Allows them, maybe for the first time, to start taking off that heavy emotional armor.
And the sources frame this ethical approach as the strongest kind of connection.
The strongest kind of seduction, in the sense of drawing someone close authentically. The kind that respects their soul, honors their humanity beyond the wounds, seeks their well-being.
It positions it not just as morally right, but as the only way to build truly meaningful, resilient connections. Influence through elevation, not exploitation.
Exactly.
Which brings us right to the end, and the sources return to that urgent, serious warning tone. A final, forceful message.
Emotional trauma is not a game, not a trick, not a technique for flirting or persuasion. It is sacred ground.
Sacred ground. That's powerful phrasing. What does it signify?
Profound reverence and respect. When someone reveals their pain, their vulnerability, you're being allowed into the most private chamber of their being, their innermost emotional sanctuary.
And with that access comes
immense non-negotiable responsibility, a call for reverence in how you treat that space, that fragile trust.
Because the consequence of violating it
is immense. The damage caused by exploiting revealed pain might take years to repair, maybe never fully repair. It's presented as potential soul-level harm.
To really drive it home, the material repeats those key points. People with trauma are vulnerable.
Yes, and their unmet needs, their fears, can make them easier influence initially because they crave safety and acceptance.
And this is the critical balance, they're also more fragile because of those same wounds.
Absolutely. They're not puzzles to solve for your curiosity, not conquests for your ego.
They're human beings, fighting unseen battles, carrying hidden burdens.
Fundamentally human. complex, resilient, struggling.
So the final ethical directive is clear.
Very clear. If you seek deep connection, if you're attracting someone, seduce ethically. Use empathy, care, respect, not exploitation.
Create space, not traps. Heal, don't harm.
That's the essence of it. Heal, don't harm.
And the concluding thought the material leaves us with
Is powerful. When someone gives you their heart, their trust, their vulnerability, if you've walked the ethical path, treated that space as sacred, you will have profoundly earned it.
earned through genuine, respectful connection, not manipulation.
That earning based on care, reverence, commitment to their well-being is framed as the strongest, most valuable, most enduring connection possible,
It completely flips the script on influence coming from power over weakness.
suggesting the deepest bond comes from respecting vulnerability, being present with pain without exploiting it, valuing their inherent worth.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the core tension is clear. The immense power understanding trauma grants.
And the profound responsibility that comes with it, that constant thread running through the sources.
The call isn't to look for vulnerabilities to exploit.
But to navigate all relationships with greater awareness of those unseen battles, and to consistently choose empathy, respect, and treating that shared humanity, those invisible bruises, as sacred ground.
Maybe something to reflect on further. The nature of empathy, healthy relationship dynamics, that deep human need to be truly known and accepted, wounds included.
Powerful and sobering territory indeed.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.